I felt like I was a very spiritual child in terms of the church and things like that. Like, we were Catholics, but we weren't sort of hardcore at all. But I had like a little statue of Jesus that I used to pray to, and I really felt very connected for some reason, even though my family wasn't all into that.
What happens to religious faith when you think you've seen something supernatural? Today in Ghostly Encounters, we'll meet a man and a woman who have lived that question. Hello, I'm Lawrence Chow. You know, when a lot of us were growing up, you just didn't miss church on Sunday. But today's world is spinning a whole lot faster, and faith, for people of many religions, is often put on the back burner. But sometimes a brush with the supernatural can revive a faith lying dormant. As a young mother, Carolyn had nightmares about losing her children. But when the nightmares turned real, she had a spiritual experience that she'll never forget.
My sisters and I took all our children and we collected them and we took them off to the PNE, which is the exhibition in Vancouver. And the day we went happened to be Children's Day. I had Connor, who was 3, and Brendan, we were pushing in the stroller. Connor was very, very interested in the motorcycle ride. You know, he absolutely loved it. So we let him do that. And then off we went on our merry way. The baby was in the stroller and Connor was right beside me. And then he wasn't. And I said, Ginny, where's Connor? And she said, Kathy, where's Connor? And none of us knew where he was. And we each thought the other was watching him. I will always, always, till the day I die, remember the panic that just flooded through my body. I just started running. And as I'm running towards him, I'm getting more and more scared because I'm thinking, but what if he isn't there? Then what? I don't know what my next move is. I don't know. And I got to the motorcycles and he wasn't there and they hadn't seen him and they didn't know who I was talking about. And so I started to run as fast as I could run. And I ran out of the little kid playland area and then I started calling that God. And I don't know if the face was in my head yet then or not. I don't think it was. But I just started calling, help, 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 help my little boy, help me find my little boy, help me find my little boy, help me find my little boy. And I swear to God, the weirdest thing happened. It was like I hit a wall, like an invisible force field. Boom! Like a big hand came out and just went and pushed me here and just went, stop. And I dropped to my knees and I started to pray. And I was in the middle of the PNE with thousands of people around me, on my knees on the pavement, crying my eyes out and saying, help me find my little boy. And this thing just took this hand, took my head and turned it. And there he was. And he was 20 feet away from me. And he was all alone. And there was nobody near him either. It was like we were the only 2 people in the world. And he was standing there crying quietly. And if that hadn't stopped me, I was going that way. And I wouldn't have seen him. And I wouldn't have found him. And I ran over and I grabbed him and I hugged him and I loved him. I think there are many names for God, and people might call it their name, and And they might say it was God, or they might say it was an angel. I think it was one of God's angels. That's the face that I can put to God.
Angels are believed to have no freedom of choice. They are merely agents of God's will. The exception is Lucifer, the fallen angel. In Milton's Paradise Lost, Lucifer chose to reign in hell rather than serve God in heaven. So if angels do God's bidding, it's not surprising to hear that Carolyn feels God directed an angel's hand to help her. But before that day, there were years when Carolyn wouldn't even say God's name.
I can't believe I'm going to tell you this. I had a really horrific thing happen to me when I was a teenager. It was a sexual assault is what happened. And I didn't tell my mom and dad, and I didn't tell anybody until years later, you know. But at the time, I didn't tell anyone. Yeah, and so because I didn't tell anyone, I was alone with it. And you start to develop a sense of your own self-sufficiency. And you trick yourself into thinking that you are capable of dealing with it. Because I was a very capable person. I was quite bright, and I could do things. And I thought, well, and this I can also do. And so I isolated myself from everything, from everybody, and from God, from that face. And I stopped talking to him about things.
Carolyn turned away from God after going through that terrifying ordeal. She found her way back to him on the midway because she felt he answered her cry for help. That renewal of faith convinced Carolyn she wasn't alone, and that she could now confront her attacker and send him to jail 16 years after the assault. But as she re-embraced her faith and prepared to go to court, the attack took on new resonance and challenged her faith yet again.
My head was into, okay, in a month I have to go to trial, and it's going to be horrendous, and they're going to tear me apart and blah, blah, and I have to relive this whole horrible ordeal. And as I'm thinking about that, all those old feelings are coming back of I'm worthless and not worth loving, So yeah, vulnerable. I guess that would make me vulnerable to all kinds of things. It was very late at night. And then I heard and felt footsteps in the room coming in through the door and walking past the bed, and I couldn't see anything. I felt this sense of creeping evil that became overwhelming evil. I could feel it in my pores. I could feel it all around me. It was just, there is something unspeakably evil in this room right now with me. And then the chair moved as if whatever it was had climbed into the chair and rocked it forward and then rocked it back. And there it sat. I felt it watching me. I felt it sitting there, and I didn't ever see it, but I felt it sitting there in the chair that it had climbed into, and it was watching me, and I felt its eyes sort of boring through my head, and through the covers, watching. I've never, ever, ever been so scared in all of my life, except for when I lost my son. And so I huddled under my covers, and then I came up for peeks, and then I started to pray, and it was that old prayer, the help me prayer. Help me, help me, help me, help me. And then on my next peek, the curtains did a little move, and I felt it leave. It sounds weird, which is why I hesitate saying it, but I feel like it was something that felt that I was at a vulnerable point and that maybe I could be attacked. Again, I asked for help, and I got help, and that's why I left. I mean, because I didn't do anything except say, God, help me, help me, help me. You know, I didn't string out garlic or do any of the things people do, right? But something compelled it to leave.
Carolyn thinks she got help because she was ready to receive it. Her Catholic background made her open to the idea of spiritual beings in the world. Catholicism is one of the Christian streams that still embraces such a belief. Eric Robertson didn't grow up Catholic, but he was raised in an environment that allowed him, like Carolyn, to believe in spiritual beings.
All of my family were involved in some way in the book business. They were publishers, they were binders, they were proofreaders, they were all sorts of things. So I was surrounded by all manner of books when I was a child. And for some reason, there was a series of books that came from the 1880s by the people that had been involved in the Society for Psychical Research. So I heard all sorts of things about apparitions and thought transference and early hypnotism and that sort of thing. So that's always been of extreme interest to me. I come from a background in Edinburgh, the spiritualist movement is very, very strong. My aunt was a spiritualist and attended the Spiritualist Society in Edinburgh that was founded by Conan Doyle. In Scotland, a lot of these things are taken for granted, and taken for granted in a good way, in a, I'd say, childlike, naive way in a way. It just, these are things that can happen, and yeah, sure. And if you believe that, they do.
The spiritualist movement offered communication with the dead, and it was understandably popular in post-war Scotland. But Eric's passion lay in another direction. As a boy, all he wanted to do was play the organ, and that devotion led him into some frightening situations.
In the place that I did most of my practice, I would cycle to this church at night and park my bicycle in the graveyard. And then I'd have to go and get the key from the manse, which was across the graveyard. I would get the key and I'd have to come back through the graveyard, back into the church, and find the only light in the dark by feel. I had to feel along the walls, find out where it was, and then get the organ on and start to practice. And all of the time looking into a black void all around me. All I could see was the music about a foot beyond and then a black void. And that sets up a certain number of feelings. One is fear, which you constantly try and downplay it. My desire to play the organ was so strong that I was able to overcome that fear while I was playing. The hardest part was coming into the church, and even harder than that was going out. I always felt that I had to go real fast and get out of there quick, back into the graveyard. So essentially the feelings I had when I was really young were feelings of fear, combined with feelings of total exaltation. I mean, being a 10-year-old boy, being able to do whatever you wanted on a huge instrument was just, I mean, it's amazing. And I mean, I just no other way to describe that.
Despite his fear, Eric kept playing the organ. Eventually, his dedication brought him to Toronto, where he became known as one of the best organists in the country. It was there that the unseen specters he'd feared as a boy finally took shape.
I remember one day just being in the church, just playing, and I sort of had this feeling that somebody was with me. It's not an uncommon feeling, because if you're in a big building, you like to know if somebody's with you. Anyway, this one day, it was actually during the day, I was just sitting there, and I was positive somebody was there, but I was supposed to be alone. And out of the corner of my eye, I could see somebody sitting in the gallery of the church. And I was playing straight on, and the gallery was off to my right, and I eventually turned my head, and then it went away. Like, it was just, because sometimes you get these little things happening. I started playing again, and eventually I looked up again, and I found that if I didn't look, I could just kind of look ahead of me. I could just see it peripherally. And it would look like an old person. But I discovered if I looked at it, it would go away. And I thought, that's really weird. And I was starting to feel a little strange, actually, because I'm getting this sort of prickly feeling on my neck and just feeling uncomfortable a bit. And I discovered that if I didn't look at it, it came back. And this person, I had the feeling it was an old lady, looked like an old lady to me, who appeared to be wearing just sort of not normal clothing, just sort of something. I think sometimes when we think we're frightened, I'm not sure that we actually are. I think we're just experiencing something important or something that's got a real rush to it, you know. And I think that's an important distinction. So I think when I felt what I thought was frightening, I think it's more complicated than that. I don't think it's just, you know, somebody's chasing you with a cleaver or something. That's terror. This is not fear, it's not terror. It's an awareness that something significant is happening.
Often those who think they've seen a ghost deny it. They're afraid of being called crazy. They have what our psychotherapists call a strong adult ego state, the so-called thinking mechanism. Rather than deny it, Eric tested his adult ego by asking for more evidence. He told the apparition to bring it on.
That was the first thing I did when I went back, and I had to look up in the gallery and see if she was still there, because she wasn't. But started thinking more and more about what does that mean? Like, why was she there? Like, why would that happen? You know, just that doesn't happen. I mean, why? You know? And then it happened again, and this time I thought to myself, you know, this is not scary anymore. This is interesting. This is really, really interesting. And I just went through the same process again, but not with the same degree of wanting to look. I just kept on playing, and I got the impression that I was with somebody and that somebody was with me, and everything was okay, you know. I had a really strong feeling of not being alone. She's wise and she's friendly. I think she's friendly. She's certainly powerful. She's completely silent. Completely and utterly silent. It's like being in a vacuum. It's like being in a recording studio with nobody in it. It's just dead. There's just nothing happening at all in the air. Nothing. Got the feeling that everything sort of went quiet and stood still. It's an envelopment of quiet. I can stay doing what I'm doing and she'll stay where she is. And in terms of feeling, I do get a feeling. I get a feeling of I guess a feeling of warmth. There's a feeling of safety, actually, in this funny sort of a way. The one thing about this whole thing that kind of I find upsetting is I can't talk to this person. I'd love to actually talk to her. Maybe I will. I don't know. I so far, she's not available. She's inscrutable. She's totally quiet, and she's totally distant, and totally focused. Is totally focused on me. There's always a reason for her being there. She doesn't just show up. There's always something that I just in progress, or something's going to happen, or something's not right. It's that premonition that things are going to be all right. But you got to take care of things. You know, it's not going to be all right if you keep on doing what you're doing. Things have to change. And it's a message. She's sort of a message.
Many religions, including some Jewish and Christian groups, steer away from the spirit world. There's a fear that when you open that door, evil can come in with the good. But as Carolyn and Eric's stories show us, accepting the idea that there are spirits can have a positive impact on faith. Carolyn needed the God she'd known as a child. Eric needed the reassurance that there is life beyond what we know here on earth, and both found their faith was made solid as a result of their encounters with the supernatural.
I am absolutely convinced that I'm not alone in this world. From that, I'm absolutely convinced of it. There is another part to life. There's another stream of life, and I can feel being in it, and I can feel being out of it.
I have an absolutely unshakable faith in God, and that's cool, and that stays with me through any amount of turmoil and any amount of things that could possibly cause me to question His presence in my life, and His power and the power of these angels. Anything that could ever cause me to question that, I just go, nope. You know what? I know, because I lived it, and I'm not given to flights of fancy at all.
This high-flying real-life series will have you airborne.
Can you get me an anxiety pill, please?
On Airline. Then, let the games begin on Caesars 24/7, where the stakes are high and the bets are real.
You took my money!
Airline, followed by Caesars 24/7, Tuesdays starting at 10, only on Bio. True story.